Some things are impossible to miss, like an elephant in the room, or a bull in a china shop, or this season's amazing offers, brought to you by PayPal. Discover offers from hundreds of brands like Viator, Allbirds, and Tory Burch right in the PayPal app. Save an offer before you check out with PayPal and earn unlimited rewards. Download the PayPal app to get started. Terms and exclusions apply. See paypal.com/rewards terms.
It's time to bring on the blooms at the Home Depot with spring garden deals. Find savings on hanging baskets and flowers to brighten your backyard or any space that needs instant color. Then get everything you need to plant and protect them with low prices guaranteed on soil and mulch. Dig into spring garden deals for 4 days at the Home Depot. Now through May 10th. Exclusions apply. See homedepot.com/price match for details.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey. But here's the thing: we always talk about Wicked at the top of the show. And Eric and I were just talking before we get started here, and we got nothing, folks. I mean, it finally happened. We wound up in a Wicked-free week. But you have an idea, right, Eric?
Well, I feel like, when we are known for having to talk about Wicked, but I also get plenty of messages on a weekly basis about anything Butterbeer related. So I feel like this is our freebie, our pass. Like our substitution for Wicked this week will be a story that'll come a little bit later that talks about Butterbeer. So it's kind of Wicked or Butterbeer. I think we can keep the streak going. It's one or the other is like the substitution in. So what do you say, Jim?
Well, now, interesting you mentioned Butterbeer because just recently Nancy's friend handed her, it was a 1-2 punch, I guess they were Butterbeer-flavored Hershey's Kisses and then Butterbeer-flavored Goldfish.
Yeah, I've had them both.
Okay.
And we're just back from Easter in which I had Butterbeer-flavored Peeps.
That was the next thing I was going to talk about because they're literally at the back of the bread box now. I have not opened them, and to be honest, our Peeps, there's that joke about Twinkies, it's like Jay Leno, the effect of you look at the writing on the side of a bag of Twinkies, it says, "Hey pal, you should live so long." Is that the same thing with an expiration date on Peeps? Because they're not really food, right? They are.
Primarily, we've used Peeps for. You ever see Peep jousting? Jim, you ever see where you put a little toothpick in one of the Peep and you put them in the microwave and you have them distance and they grow big and then they end up poking each other? It's Peep jousting.
Oh, no.
Yeah, go to YouTube.
Well,
There's
go.
a lot
of
bored people like myself that try. So if they do go bad, you'll get some good action and you can place bets in your microwave.
There we go. All right. I now have something to do while making dinner this evening. So, but before I do that, we've got this week's show to get to, and and we've been starting the show lately with you reaching out to folks and asking them to help us along with reviews, and they've been nice enough to actually go over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and tell us what they think of the show.
That's right. And like I said, if we keep getting reviews, I'll read them. So we have a real nice one coming in from Jersey Bookworm. It says, charming, clever, and insightful. The wealth of knowledge brought by Jim Hill, the curiosity and smart questions brought by Eric, and the evident good humor and sincere delight exuded by both has made this podcast a must-listen on my commute. That very kind. Good use of words.
Exceedingly kind. Wow. All right. Excuse me. I'm going to slip a 20 into an envelope and send it to Jersey Bookworm.
That's it. You want your next trip. Oh, and we also got one from J to the L that says the best Universal Studios podcast ... ever in all caps. So love the show. Jim's always full of wonderful historical anecdotes about the Universal parks, and it's fun to hear Eric share his new experiences with Universal. They have great chemistry together. Download today. Yes, please download. Thank you.
Wow.
You're very nice, and we have a couple more coming through that I can read in the next couple weeks, but if you want to be on that list, head over to jimhillmedia.com/epic. It takes you right to Apple Podcast. You can leave a review. We'll read it. We did just get an updated review, Jim. We had a 2-star where we got yelled at for mansplaining, and they went ahead and updated it to 1 because we mispronounced someone's name last week. But they're continuing listening. So it's our most loyal 1-star. Please edit, and can we get to a 0 with that one very happy, disgruntled person? So we'll try not to mispronounce anybody's names this week. All right.
I mean, I give them points. They're being consistent. It reminds me of, did you ever hear that story about Howard Stern, about how people who really, really like Howard Stern supposedly listen to the show for 3 hours, and the reason they listen, the primary reason they listen, they want to hear what he says next. But then it turned out that the people who really, really hated Howard Stern listened to the show for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And when they were asked, why would you listen? Is it, well, I want to hear what he says next.
It's hate watching, hate listening.
Hate watching.
That's what it is. It is literally a thing. I've seen that in the pro wrestling world quite often. They hate watch. They watch it and then complain about the whole thing. I'm like, why are you watching? But no, we thank everyone's reviews. But this time around, Jersey Bookworm and J to the L, thank you for the 5 stars.
Yes. And again, I'm sorry about mispronouncing the name. Okay. All right. Well, I better not mispronounce this name because this is the name of our sponsor. But if you're planning a trip to Universal Orlando or the Walt Disney World Resort, check out Unlocked Magic. Listeners to the Epic Universal podcast are saving up to 12% on theme park tickets and now have the ability to purchase Express Pass through Unlocked Magic, saving even more money. So be sure and visit unlockedmagic.com and save today. So, and speaking of today, Eric has gone out and scoured the web and found all sorts of cool Universal-related news. So what do you got this week?
Jim, this one is fresh off the press. I saw it yesterday on X. And this is a crazy one. The Grand Helios, that very fancy new hotel that is right at the front of Epic that you could stay and you can kind of see over. The opening week of Halloween Horror Nights, which is I think it runs August 28th to November 1st, maybe. People were finding rooms online through Universal where that hotel starting at $293 on the opening week of Halloween Horror Nights.
Okay.
As a price comparison, Jim, this is the hotel that when we were pricing it out not so long ago was on the $500-$600 range.
Yes.
And is kind of the flagship one over in that little area. And also, if you drive further down the road, something like the Little Mermaid standard room is $285 for that same time frame. So,
whoa,
yeah. So
$293 for the Helios versus $285 for a standard room. At Disney's Art of Animation. Wow.
Yeah, and this isn't just like a short, this isn't a, hey, we're definitely dead. This is the start of the most busy time for Universal with Halloween Horror Nights, the opening week for this. So everybody is asking, what is going on here? What is their game plan? And I know you've mentioned on shows before, the whole endless summer kind of deal is like, oh, we're going to give you a discount. We'll profit at a loss to get you to try out. Do you think that is what this is, or is this just a weird coincidence and these rates are going to be flying back up real high and we missed our window?
I don't know. I mean, the only thing I can possibly think of is, we'll think about it. If at the end of your night, again, you haven't done it yet, so you don't understand the bone tired feeling you have at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning at a Halloween Horror Night when you're stumbling out of your your last maze, and typically you're deep in the park and you now have to hike to the front of the park to get back to your car to drive to wherever you're staying, and Helios, that's the furthest one out. Would have to be, right? Except for the Stella Nova and the Terra Luna.
Yeah, those ones are all going to be in, it's going to be further away. So, I mean, is this just to maybe distribute the crowds? Basically give you an incentive to try not to stay as close?
Yeah, I wonder. But wow, that is a great rate, and more to the point, given on the very last show when we had Chris Cox on, and he talked about how cool it was to be staying in that hotel, and for example, have your daughter forget her water bottle, and 10 minutes later, you've hiked out of the park, you've got it, and you're back, inside of Super Nintendo World. So, wow, I mean, that's a really, really tempting price. It might be worth it to build a trip just around that, the savings in that hotel room.
Were you sitting with Lauren and I at the kitchen table just earlier? Because that's what she was like. She's like, I think we should go. I'm like, sure, Lauren.
Well, it's something like that where it's just you feel the need, especially given the way people have evangelized about that hotel and how beautiful it is. And in theory, by that time, I mean, how many rehearsals for the nighttime show? How much construction have we seen going on for the fountain? You got to assume by, but wait a minute, this is August, right?
Yeah,
the first week?
August 28th to November 1st is the Halloween Horror Night. So this is when it was quoted.
Okay. All right. So, all right. That's fascinating. Let's pay attention to that and see if that price sticks for some reason, because that cannot make the people at Disney happy. Nobody at Disney wants that sort of comparison out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's but it could be a telling sign of like, I'm not sure if the hotel rates and the occupancy rates at the Grand Helios is not selling well enough. I mean, I'm not too sure. I think this looks to me like, hey, let's get people to try this over here, and if you're staying here, then certainly you're going to want to try our new park.
No, absolutely. Face it, the folks at Comcast love the theme park business, and if this is a gambit to get people to sample the new hotel, take a loss, but on the room, but you'll make it up on food and merch. So.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we'll be looking. I will let you know if we end up booking ourselves one down there for that time. But it's certainly appealing.
All right. We were talking about, by August, maybe the Fountain Show will be up, but also maybe the new version of the Universal Horror Makeup Show will be up and running, because it's closing next week. Is that what we're hearing?
Yeah. So May 12th. So that would be next Tuesday. So you're listening on this on Friday, so Tuesday. So you only got a couple days to get down there. Now, remember, Jim, we talked about this in January, that they were going to close it down, and then they were like, well, we're going to keep it open for a while. And I think the speculation for us was because they were tearing down Rip Ride Rocket, they needed something else to take over some of that traffic, and maybe they got everything under control now, and they kind of know where the flow is and so forth. But yeah, they're taking it down completely. And I mean, I think it's just described. We really don't know what's going on, but it's just described that it's going to be an updated version of it, which was this originally when it came together, when it first came to park? Was it a Phantom of the Opera show or something like that?
Well, again, it was more of a celebration of the classic Universal monsters, and again, I mean, face it, that one of the reasons I used to love when Universal Orlando PR, whenever they'd hold an event, they'd typically, the pen they used to hold us in was the lobby of the horror makeup show, and in fact, more often than not, they'd have the buffet in there, and then we'd all wander into the room next door, and that's where the creatives would talk about, some of the new mazes and that sort of thing. And I always loved that space because it just gave me time to linger and look at the amazing display in there that, so many of the classic Universal horror films have great posters and props and that sort of thing in that space. So, but over time, of course, you want to put the newer stuff in. In fact, that's, for me, what'll be intriguing to revisit the show later later this year and see how they freshened it up. Because let's be honest, these days, when you make a monster in a movie, it usually doesn't involve latex. It's somebody sitting at a laptop, moving pixels around.
Yeah. So and I mean, I know that I think the Mummies, the 2017 Mummy was featured highly in this one. So I mean, I imagine they're just going to update the inside with some of the new properties. So it'll be interesting to see. But it is closing, so here's your notice. You got 3 days from the time you're listening to this on Friday.
And speaking of closing, now we switch over to Islands of Adventure, and this is kind of intriguing because this is Thunder Falls Terrace, the quick service restaurant over in the Jurassic Park area, that side of the park, right?
Right. So I can't remember. I know you guys mentioned something over on the Disney Dish, but I couldn't remember if it was you talking about Mythos and that possibly closing or it was this. But basically, there is a permit filed for the interior renovations of the Thunder Falls Terrace. So, and I just was wondering, like, is this just a basic, hey, we're just going to fix up stuff. There's not any bigger plans or future. They're certainly not getting away from the Jurassic World or Jurassic Park theme.
No.
But what did you and Jim or you and Len talked about previously on the Dish about something closing down, or maybe some hypotheticals of, hey, we're near Jurassic World?
What's interesting about this is, face it, we've Alicia Stella that has been, doing her typical amazing work and staying on top of, what's been going on down in the Lost Continent section, just over the bridge from Seuss's Landing, and there's something going in there. And what's interesting is that the restaurant that's in the immediate vicinity of, the new project is Mythos. And look, Gittes, for years there has been that banner on the outside of the best theme park restaurant in Orlando. And I think those of us who actually have eaten in Mythos, it's like, well, maybe 10 years ago. And what's been suggested is that when this side of the park goes down, in much the same way as, remember, the Royal Oak Tavern, that Merlin-themed restaurant up at the top of the hill for Lost Continent in Merlinwood, how that got retooled to become, the Three Broomsticks. And, just that there evidently has been some talk about, when this side of the park goes down, it's not just Poseidon's Fury that'll get transformed. It'll also be Mythos, and these two entities will then become a piece of a whole for a brand new land. And when you do that, you obviously need to have another sit-down restaurant to sort of hold the fort down while Mythos gets reimagined into whatever it's becoming. And I think that's what Len was talking about, that Thunder Falls Terrace, potentially with this redo, might become a placeholder for Mythos while whatever's going on in the lower section of Lost Continent, again, the smart money's still on Zelda. And I guess I have to ask all of my Nintendo friends out there does Zelda have a food component?
I'll ask my brother. He plays a lot of that. I think it's Call of the Wind or Call of the Wild, one of those games.
Okay.
He's always wandering around. I'll have to say where his character gets their meals.
Yeah, find out, if there's some place that, I know a lot, like World of Warcraft and that sort of thing. They have amazing taverns. So, just wonder, Zelda got a tavern? And if so, what might it be?
We'll play around with that. That's what I was wondering, Jim. That's what it seems like on paper. Let's fix up this one real nice, and then when that one's all ready to go, we could shut the other one down. So
okay, and of course we were just talking about how the uppermost section of Lost Continent back in 2010 became the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, but now you just can't contain the boy wizard. He's breaking out of the theme parks and he's showing up. Well, Cinnabon, what is this we're looking at?
He's showing up anywhere near you. this. Producer Dave sent me this one. This is when I know I am branded Butterbeer because I get messaged about Butterbeer. So here's our Butterbeer's news of the week. Cinnabon has launched new Harry Potter Butterbeer themed treats nationwide. So Dave and I were actually looking to see where the heck is one near us. We need to go travel and find a local Cinnabon because they have basically the Cinnapack, which features Cinnabon classic cinnamon rolls topped with Butterbeer-inspired frosting. Oof. So, yes. And not only that, there's also the Chelata, which I've never tried, but it's a blended frozen beverage combining butterbeer flavoring with a creamy vanilla base. But they are now available. So if you can't make your way to either coast at a Wizarding World to get yourself a butterbeer, you might be able to get some here at a local Cinnabon. So I want to hear if you get to them before I do, which I'm going to be searching this weekend for them. Let us know how they taste and if they're any good, and how far should I drive to find a Cinnabon.
Well, I'm just going to put this out there, Eric. You and I have been talking about making a trip to Philadelphia to check out the Universal exhibit at the Franklin Institute, which, by the way, only runs through September. So the clock is ticking. And it's Philadelphia. There's got to be a Cinnabon there.
Right.
So,
I mean, listen, on my 400-mile drive there, I think I'm sure I can find a couple, right?
There we go. All right. So, and maybe while you're in the car, the kids can be watching Casper, the Universal film from 1995, which, by the way, when we get back from this break, we're going to talk about that film and, weirdly, how important it is viewed today by the visual effects community. But before we do that, there's this.
You said this place was steps from the water.
We just haven't found the steps yet.
How much did we save?
Enough.
Enough to get lost?
Or you could book a stay with Hilton.
Welcome to your oceanfront room, just steps from the water.
The Hilton sale is on now. Book on Hilton.com or the Hilton app and save up to 20% to get the stay you expected. When you want savings, not surprises, it matters where you stay. Hilton, for the stay.
Wishing you could be there live for the big game, soaking up the atmosphere of the crowd. But too often, life gets busy, or the price holds you back. Priceline is here to help you make it happen. With millions of deals on flights, hotels, and rental cars, you can go see the game live. Don't just dream about the trip, book it with Priceline. Download the Priceline app or visit Priceline.com. Actual prices may vary. Limited time offer.
No one goes to Hank's for spreadsheets. They go for a darn good pizza. Lately, though, the shop's been quiet, so Hank decides to bring back the $1 slice. He asks Copilot in Microsoft Excel to look at his sales and costs and help him see if he can afford it. Copilot shows Hank where the money's going and which little extras make the dollar slice work. Now Hank's has a line out the door. Hank makes the pizza, Copilot handles the spreadsheets. Learn more at m365copilot.com/work.
And we're back. Okay, folks, I don't know how many of you saw this news when it broke last month. It officially was released on April 29th. But did you see, Eric, that there is a new Casper live-action series reportedly in the works for Disney Plus?
Yeah, there's a little bit of drama with it, right? This wasn't just Disney. There's more to this story.
Well, no, absolutely. In fact, first of all, just to understand what we're talking about here, I mean, this is shooting the pilot. This, they have to make a pilot, and if everybody likes it, it might then go to series. And supposedly the inspiration here, for this show is Wednesday, the reimagining of the Addams Family. That's been a huge hit over at Netflix. In fact, they're in the middle of shooting the third season of that show right now.
Right.
But as Eric mentioned, there was a drama, because this was a bidding situation, that it wasn't just Disney that was interested in this project. Supposedly, Netflix put up a pretty substantial bid, likewise Amazon Prime, and even Universal through Peacock supposedly, was frantically bidding on this. And what's fascinating, absolutely fascinating about this, Eric, is it's a Universal production. In fact, it's going to be produced by UPC, which is a division of the Universal Studios Group. So think about this, folks. Universal could be producing a TV series that will then be shown on Disney Plus. So it's kind of like going into your local McDonald's and it's like, hey, can I have one of them Whoppers you were telling me about? And what's especially interesting about this, in fact, this news broke today, that Disney, and it's one of those things where it's like, what does this tell us about Josh D'Amaro, Disney's new CEO? Did you see this news about how Hocus Pocus 3 is now officially a go at Disney?
I saw that Hocus Pocus. It came up briefly on my Facebook, so I didn't read the whole full headline, but I just assumed that that's what's going. But the last one was pretty big success, wasn't it? That was a Disney Plus, direct Disney Plus, right?
Yeah. In fact, for that time, this was September of 2022. And by the way, 29 years after the original Hocus Pocus first arrived in theaters, August of 1993. In that window of time, it quickly became the most viewed film ever at Disney Plus. I think that's changed since then.
Wow. Even that's quite impressive. I didn't realize it was that successful.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what's especially interesting about what's been said about Hocus Pocus 3 is theatrical. It starts theatrical and then will go to Disney Plus. So it's kind of the Moana 2 business plan.
Okay.
But again, the original Hocus Pocus out in theaters August of 1993. And just 2 years after that, in May of 1995, that's when the original Steven Spielberg produced Casper first arrived in theaters. And again, that back then was a Universal Pictures production. And I bring this up on a show that celebrates the Universal theme parks because, as the film was opening in theaters, Eric, that's when Casper on Location, which was a walk-through exhibit, opened at Universal Studios, Florida. And, Eric, this was a surprisingly large thing. It was spread across 2 sound stages at that theme park, Soundstage 22 and 23. It featured actual sets from the film, the dining room, the library, and the secret laboratory at Whipstaff Manor, not to mention a gallery of props. And it also featured photo ops with Casper's uncles, the Ghostly Trio, which for those of you who don't know their names, it was Stretch, Stinky, and Fatso. But part of this Casper on Location exhibit at Universal Studios Florida was an elaborate display by Industrial Light and Magic explaining how they had done the effects of this Brad Sibberling movie. And again, I mentioned it earlier on in today's show. Casper, even today, is considered a genuinely groundbreaking film for the mid-1990s. In fact, if you talk with people in visual effects, they put it up there, Eric, right alongside of Jurassic Park.
Well, Jim, I mean, this was my era. Like, this was the stuff we were saying. And I don't recall a better CGI, graphics at this time. Like, I remember it being cutting edge because, sure, we had some cartoons mixing with humans, but this was like the first time where it seemed like they were real. Now, granted, I haven't went back and watched it. I don't know if it holds up, but certainly from a CGI perspective back then, I remember it being a big deal.
Well, evidently, the reason that people point to this film even today is Casper was the very first film to have a fully CG character in a leading role. That, I mean, don't get me wrong, the T-Rex in the original Jurassic Park is impressive, but again, he's Paprika. If you pull out a stopwatch, he's not in that movie as long as you think he is, but he really, really, really makes an impression. On the other hand, Casper as a character is in 3/4 of this film.
Right.
And by the way, the physical production of the film, they shot it, started shooting it in late January of 1994 and continued through June of that same year, 94. And what I love about this is the interiors of Whipstaff Manor were built on Soundstage 28 out in Universal Hollywood, and that was the Phantom Stage. This was where the Paris Opera House got built back in 1924 for Lon Chaney's Phantom of the Opera, and so very appropriate that Casper was shot there because a lot of longtime Universal employees insisted that soundstage was haunted, that you'd go in there and it's like you'd see a hooded figure up on the catwalks and it's like, I don't want to be in here.
They were hoping for some practical effects. They were like, well, we're going to make it CG, but just in case, we can get some of this practical effects here.
There we go. Sadly, Soundstage 28 was actually torn down in 2014 to make room for Universal Studios Hollywood's newest land, Super Nintendo World. It is worth noting, however, that the Paris Opera sets were placed in storage, and Universal recognized the historical significance. They just haven't done anything with them. But anyway, the next 11 months from when they finished shooting the movie in June of 1994 till when it arrived in theaters in May of 1995 were all about, producing the CG scenes. Which, because Casper and his uncles, the ghostly trio, had to be translucent in most of the scenes, very labor intensive. That, in fact, there's Casper's first scene where he interacts with Christina Ricci's Cat Harvey character. It's only 90 seconds long, but to get that right took 8 full months to animate.
I could never do that. That work seems to me like I could never do animation or anything like that. It takes way too long. But it is amazing that that we have people that can attention to detail.
The artists who do this work have the patience of saints. But
yes,
and more to the point, again, the thing with Casper was, it was constantly the situation of, okay, there are also props in the scenes that they need to interact with. There are live actors they need to interact with, and, just camera movements and lighting. And it's just crazy amount of work involved with finaling all of these shots. And anyway, now back to the Casper on location thing that was located, again, on Soundstage 28 and 25 at the Universal. Eric, this was hugely popular with guests at that theme park, and so much so that if Universal Studios Florida had a choice, they would have left that walkthrough attraction up and running. But the problem was that by this point, the theme park had already sold tickets to that year's Halloween Horror Nights, and it was the 5th year that Universal Studios Florida was presenting that hard ticket, and they were going to run it for a whole 12 nights, Eric.
Oh, wow. That's like a fan fest now.
No, that's exactly. It didn't even start till the middle of October, the 13th. And then, what is it? It ran the 13th and 19th, or 13th through the 14th, the 19th through the 21st, and the final week, 25th through the 31st. But
Jim, that seems like Christmas. That's Christmas season. We need August.
But what was also interesting is at this same time, season 2 of Sequest DSV had actually moved out of Universal Studios Hollywood. They had traveled to Florida with the hope of lowering their overall production costs. And this just meant that Soundstage 24 and 28 were needed. I mean, just between this after-hours hard ticket and then accommodating production of this primetime show on NBC. So the Casper walkthrough closes just after Labor Day in 1995. That's September 4th of that year. And what's interesting is out in California, they had a smaller attraction, Casper Behind the Screams. That was up on the upper lot in Hollywood in the vicinity of the Animal Actors stage. And that ran pretty much the same time. It was opened the same day the movie opened in the theaters, May 26th. And by Labor Day, it closed. But again, Casper did surprisingly well at the box office. It was the 6th highest grossing film for all of 1995, and it beat out these well-reviewed action films for adults. I mean, things like Crimson Tide, Die Hard with a Vengeance, even that year's James Bond movie, GoldenEye, didn't make as much money as Casper. And it winds up selling $100 million worth of tickets stateside, almost double that overseas, 190, and a worldwide gross of $290 million. And given that Casper had only cost Universal $55 million to make, that was a very nice return on that investment. So, Eric, you got to assume popular at the box office. The walkthrough exhibit drew a lot of guests, had long lines at the parks. That should have translated to a theatrical sequel and a theme park attraction, don't you think?
Yeah, they did make one, though, right? I don't remember, but
they got close, and we'll talk about how close in a moment. But first, this.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Introducing the new Best Skin Ever Ultra Slim Precision Concealer from Sephora Collection. It's full coverage with a matte finish and perfect for any look. Whether you're building it up for a full glam moment or targeting correction for a more natural vibe. At only $12, it's great for affordable touch-ups on the go. Get this new must-have concealer at Sephora or at Sephora.com today.
And we're back. All right. I got to tell you, folks, one of the reasons we're doing this story on today's show is my co-host, Disney Dish, Len Testa, was recently backstage on some sort of a tour at Universal, and literally one night on my phone, I get a message from Len. It's like, okay, I'm standing in front of something that, it looks like coaster tracks, and there's a 4-poster bed on the coaster tracks. What is this? And I'm like, oh my God, you have found the Casper ride that Universal almost built. And oh my God, this got close. So ridiculously close. But again, we were just talking about the Casper movie that Steven Spielberg produced back in 94 and 95, directed by Brad Sieberling, and again, very significant in the visual effects space. And again, based on making almost $300 million worldwide, should have gotten a theatrical release sequel. And again, work was done on a Casper-themed attraction. But what happens? It doesn't get any of that. It does, however, get 2 direct-to-video prequels. There's Casper, A Spirited Beginning, that hit store shelves, Eric, in September of 97. That's 2 years and 3 months after Casper opens in theaters. And then a year and 2 weeks after that, we get Casper Meets Wendy, which became available for people to purchase and take home September 22nd, 1998. But strange bend in the story, these direct-to-video prequels didn't come from Universal's home entertainment division, but rather 20th Century Fox's home entertainment division. They had reached out to Harvey Entertainment. That's the comic book company that originally owned Casper and then licensed the motion picture rights to Universal. They're the ones, Harvey Entertainment and 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment collaborated on these home premiere prequels. And Casper was an acquisition for Harvey. I mean, the very first Casper the Friendly Ghost cartoon, it was literally called The Friendly Ghost, released at theaters in November of 45. And by the way, that's always puzzled me as well, Eric. It's like, you have a cartoon that features a ghost. Wouldn't you want to put that in theaters in October, like in front of Halloween?
Listen, when we watch Casper, we typically watch it around Halloween time. So I would say.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed like a missed opportunity. But on the other hand, it comes out in November of 45. It's successful enough that by 1952, Famous Studios, and that's the animation arm of Paramount Pictures. And for those of you who know, Famous Studios very early on was Fleischer Studios, one of the sadder stories in animation history. But anyway, by 1952, there were a dozen of these Casper cartoons. And this is when Harvey Entertainment, which is a comic book company, basically raises its hands and says, hey, how would you like comic books based on the famous Studios characters? And we're talking about like that, the little girl, little Audrey, and the big duck, baby Huey, and of course, Casper the Friendly Ghost. These comic books based on the famous Studios cartoon characters sell very, very well. In fact, so well that in 1958, Harvey Entertainment actually approaches, Paramount Pictures and said, all right, how much to buy the famous cartoon characters? I mean, just buy them outright. They wouldn't be your property anymore. They'd be ours. And, Paramount is like, they're about to shut down their theatrical animation division. And it's like, is there a downside to this? These people are offering us money for something we're about to shut. It's like, absolutely, sure, cut a check. But what they didn't anticipate is that Harvey would then begin creating on its own animation for television. And so by 1959, there was a Casper cartoon series, on, I want to say it was initially CBS, and then they went to NBC and they went to CBS. There was the new Casper cartoon show, and then there was, in 1979, Eric, I kid you not, it was Casper and the Angels, as in Charlie's Angels.
Television was weird in the 70s, I'm sure.
Oh, television was so weird in the 70s. So, but anyway, on the heels of Spielberg acquiring the film rights to make a feature-length Casper movie, Harvey saw this, okay, that's going to make a big splash. This is an opportunity to get another animated series going, and so they do. They get the Spooktacular New Adventures of Casper, which debuts on the Fox Kids programming block in February of 96, so it's the very next year after the movie came out. And that runs for 2 years through the late summer of 98. And this is the thing. The folks at Harvey were so smart that when they were cutting the deal with Spielberg, they managed to claw back the rights to make Casper prequels. It's like, sure, you can make a Casper movie, but we can make a prequel. And this is when, they turn to the folks at Fox, who are very pleased with the numbers they're getting for the show on Fox Kids, and like, hey, would you like to do some stuff for your home entertainment division with Casper? And they're like, absolutely, we will do that. Whereas Universal, the Casper movie from 95 had made enough money that as early as fall of that year, Universal Pictures announced, we're developing a direct sequel to that Brad Sieberling movie. In fact, we anticipate that Bill Pullman who played the dad in Casper, and Christina Ricci, who again played Cat Harvey, will both come back and play those same characters in the sequel. And they got so far as to hiring Simon Wells, the director of Prince of Egypt. He was hired to not only direct the film, he was hired to write the script for Casper too. And he handed in the script. And as you do with a movie, you begin to sort of break down, all right, what's this going to cost to make? And that was the thing. They were like, yeah, we paid $55 for the last one, and we would really like Casper 2 to cost less. We would like this to be 40, ideally 35. So is there a way we can, and you got to understand, this is a very CG film. So it's going to be hard to lower that cost. Also, another problem here is Christina Ricci, who, remember, as far back as 91 or thereabout, was, again, interesting. We the Addams Family,
right? She was
the Wednesday
right?
series.
Yeah.
She's actually been taking part in Wednesday, but she played Wednesday in the first Addams Family movies, but she's now a young adult, and do I really want to go back and play Cat Harvey? And it was kind of on the back of the fact that Simon Wells was like, well, look, it's a CG film. I don't know if I can get this thing down to $40 million. And certainly 35 is out of the question. At the same time, Christina Ricci's like, I don't know if I want to come back. So this is why Universal Pictures formally cancels Casper 2, the live-action film, in July of 2000. But the interesting thing is they still have their rights through Steven Spielberg to make a sequel. So they opt to make a CG film, Casper's Haunted Christmas, which Universal's home division sends out, puts on their shelves that very same year, Eric. I mean, it just, I'm almost reluctant to see that movie today because it's like, wow, you made it in 5 months. That must be really good.
It's all that budget. And that's the funny thing, Jim, is like, how did the prequels look compared? I mean, I know they weren't spending $45 million on those prequels. So it's just interesting that I'm glad they said, hey, we got to keep the quality for a theatrical release.
Well, but the weirdest bend on this story is 13 years later. And again, remember, our Casper's Haunted Christmas comes out for the holiday season, Universal home premiere 2000. So 2013, Spielberg announces now through DreamWorks Animation that they're going to do an all CG Casper. And not only that, Simon Wells is back. He's not only going to direct this film, just like he was supposed to direct the live-action Casper 2, but he's also going to write this movie. But from what I've been told, the exact same thing happened, Eric. It was one of these things where Simon finished his script, he submitted it to the folks at DreamWorks, and then they were like, ooh, that looks expensive. Is there any way we can creep in the cost? And it's like, Simon was like, no, not going to do this twice, and he walked away. Which, to bring this thing full circle, I want to remind folks that this deal, this announcement that Disney is in bed with Universal to make a pilot for a Casper series that will run on their streaming service, Disney Plus. This is just to make the pilot. All right. And there's going to be a decision made once they see this thing, in person about, okay, do we go to series with this? And every person I've talked to about this project so far is excited, but at the same time, it's like, that is going to be expensive. You're going to have, you're filming a show with a CG actor. And, and this is no Mandalorian and Grogu. This is not a situation where, you got a puppet on the set doing some of this stuff. It's going to be pricey. So we kind of have to be ready for this has been announced and this is potentially going to go forward. But it's also just as likely that they'll make the pilot, they'll look at that and go, that's nice, next. So, and speaking of next, on the next show, I promise we will talk about the Casper ride that was proposed for the Universal Park, and how we didn't get that, but we did get Men in Black Alien Attack and the decisions that led to that. But before we do that, I think it is time for us to close up shop for this week, Eric.
Yeah, I think so, Jim. And pretty excited to hear about this what would have been a ride, but also excited to kind of see what the heck happens here with this Casper with Disney Plus. I just got to wonder, with everybody bidding, if they say no, does that mean does Netflix or Amazon get to come back in and say, hey, we'll take a stab at it? It's just super interesting.
That's interesting. Hadn't thought about that. All right. Well, this may go into extra innings, but sadly, this week's edition of Epic the Universal Podcast will not go into extra innings. This is going to do it for this week. But if you have topics or suggestions for future shows, things that you'd like Eric and I to talk about and explore, please send those along via social media. And beyond that, on behalf of Mr. Hersey, I want to thank you for listening tonight, and he and I will be back next week.